Hey, this is C&D channel. I'm Chris, and this is MMA for you. I'm going to be doing my UFC 134 post-fight analysis. So some quick thoughts on the event. Anderson Silva is downright amazing. I mean, I don't know a guy that can seriously drop his hands, slip punches, and just counter and drop guys with what looks like a jab. I mean, Okami was supposed to be a legit challenger, and Anderson just made him look like an amateur. I mean, he does that to a lot of opponents except for Chael. I think after this fight, I think one thing this shows about Anderson too, like, I really do feel after watching this fight that the Chael versus Anderson fight really wasn't the best Anderson Silva you saw. In a rematch, like, I just get a feeling that Anderson would beat Chael, and that maybe that rib injury was legit because, it just, the guy you saw, the Anderson you saw fighting Chael isn't the guy that's fighting Vitor, Forrest Griffin, Yushin Okami. I mean, this is just a totally different guy. Other thoughts, Luis Kane is probably getting laughed on the street. I mean, he is the only Brazilian who fought a non-Brazilian to lose tonight by a TKO. I mean, it's one thing to lose like a close decision, which no one really did. And even Nogueira, who was supposed to lose in most, in like most people's minds, ended up winning by KO. So it was a really good night of fights. A lot of first round knockouts. There were actually no submission victories. Good night for the Brazilians, really. Let's get started with the prelim card and go on to the main card then. We got Yves Dubuin beating Ian Loveland by split decision. Dubuin made a cut to 135 and took this fight. Ian Loveland, he fought like Joseph Benavidez before this and lost. With Dubuin, he's a good striker. He's fought a lot of guys. It's a good win for him, but you kind of get this impression that he's still like a lower tier of the division. Next fight after that, we have Yuri Alcantara beating Felipe Arantes by unanimous decision. I said it before, and I'll say it again. Yuri Alcantara is a fighter to look out for. He definitely is a prospect. He's cutting down to 145. He beat Ricardo Lamas at 155. And with the 145 division still developing, a guy like him could actually make a lot of waves, considering that the division's kind of small. With Felipe, I mean, he took the fight on short notice. I want to say that, no, that's for another fight. So, yeah, just look out for Yuri Alcantara. It's really tough to say where he goes from here. I think he should fight more like lower tiers in the featherweight division before moving up. But, he's like 2-0 in the UFC right now. Next fight after that, we had a first round TKO by Eric Silva against Luis Ramos. Eric Silva, I mean, this guy's another prospect to look out for. Mike Swick was supposed to fight Eric Silva, and I honestly think Eric Silva was going to win. Would have won if he fought Mike Swick. The thing is with Silva that one of my friends actually mentioned versus Ramos is like being new, young, and hungry. You kind of go a little more balls out, and you kind of saw it here. I mean, Luis Ramos, they traded low, and then Eric Silva threw like a 1-2, and it was like my friend mentioned it's like this over. I mean, he like threw it from his feet. I mean, it was a really cool right hand that dropped Luis Ramos, and then he just followed up with good ground and pound. That's another story this night too. There was a lot of ground and pound here that was pretty vicious. Okay, when the Pixar lost was Rafael Sancho beating Johnny Eduardo. It's not much to say about Sancho. I mean, he also cut bantamweight, so maybe if you want him versus like Yves Dubuin would be pretty good. He's another one of those guys that I can't see getting that far into the. I mean, it's a really thin division, so I think that he can get to like the mid tier, but like there's something about him that I just don't see getting too far in the division. I mean, it's a thin division, so that kind of helps him. Next fight after that, Paul Thiago beat David Mitchell by unanimous decision. If I were to say what Paul Thiago is right now in the welterweight division, he's like the Dean of Mean Keith Jardine. Like, he's that guy that'll be competitive with the top of the division, and then he can beat most of the mid and lower tier guys. He actually pretty much outclassed David Mitchell. I mean, he'd take him down. Some of these judo throws he did and these takedowns he did were really nice. He did a couple trip takedowns that were really cool. His hands, I mean, his hands need some work. They're not great. He hits hard. And he pretty much got the decision pretty easily from Mitchell, who honestly, it's 2 fights, 2 losses in a row. Doesn't look like his stand-up doesn't look that great. He's only like a purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, despite the fact that he uses a lot of grappling. He might be cut, to be perfectly honest. With Paul Thiago, he finally got like an opponent that is kind of like a gimme fight, because I mean, he started his career fighting Josh Koscheck, and then he fought John Fitch, and after that he was supposed to fight Thiago Alves, and but he fought Jacob Volkman, and then he fought Swick, then he fought Catman, then he fought Diego Sanchez. Now he's fighting like someone that it's like, okay, he can actually showcase his skills against. So it's really it's a good win for him. A really bizarre fight came up next. That's Husmar Pajares beat Dan Miller. You know, Pajares gets in these really bizarre situations. Against Nate Marquardt, for example, he inexplicably like points at Marquardt's leg because he thought he was greasing, and then he gets like ground and pounded and loses. And you know, he held a leg lock really long against Thomas Draw, and in this fight it's like he drops Miller with the head kick, ground and pounds him, and then does a cyborg because Cyborg did this in her first Elite XC fight, and starts, you know, thinking he won when Herb Dean did absolutely nothing to indicate that, you know, Husmar won, or the fight should have been stopped. Which was funny because Pajares then gets dropped by a left hook, you know, by a left uppercut or hooked by Miller, and you know, but then Pajares managed to get the takedown, get top control. It's a good win from him. Miller's always that like mid-tier guy. That's like, if you can beat Miller, you can fight the guys higher in the division. One thing I really like about Pajares too is he pulls guard. He really looks to finish the fight either from his back. He wants to get on top, and that I really like that from him. And a guy like a Chael Sonnen or something would probably lose to a guy like Pajares just on a stylistic standpoint. You know, this is a guy you don't want to go to the ground with, unless he, you know, like Sonnen keeps it standing or something. It's really tough to say who Pajares should fight next. He's actually on a pretty good win streak. He beat David Branch before this, and now Dan Miller. It's obvious he can beat the mid-tier of the division. He's failed against the higher tiers like Dan Henderson and Nate Marquardt. But you know, it's really tough to say who should fight next. I can say like the winner of Bisping versus Miller, the winner of like Munoz versus Lieben maybe. Those are some pretty good fights. I think he should definitely get a step up in competition. There's a dream fight with him versus Damian Maia. That'd be really cool. The winner of Maia versus Santiago, maybe. That'd be really cool. With Miller, I mean, he should just. I love the Miller brothers. You know, they keep showing that they're tough as nails, and they, you know, they're gritty fighters. With him, it's kind of the same thing with Miller. Kind of like he's stuck in the mid tier. You know, there's really not much to say. If you want to give him another guy that's coming off a loss, Kyle Noki versus Dan Miller would be a pretty cool fight. Next fight after that, Thiago Tavares beat Spencer the King Fisher by TKO. The fight, I mean, Spencer Fisher was kind of defending himself when he was getting ground and pounded. Yeah, he was in a crappy position, but he wasn't actually getting hit much. So, I mean, it wasn't a bad stoppage or anything, but, you know, I think it could have gone on a little longer, personally. Tavares, you know, both these guys are in, like, these weird positions in the UFC where, like, Tavares was this guy with a lot of potential, and he lost to guys like Wyman, Shane Roller, and it's like, he's still young. His stand-up's actually pretty good. His ground game's really good. But, you know, he's kind of chinny. You don't really know if this guy's stuck in mid-tier purgatory or what. If he can cut down to 145, that, you know, it'd actually make it really interesting. But it's just, considering who he's lost to, like Roller and Wyman, it's hard to believe this guy's gonna really go that far up. But there's some good fights for him. I'd like to see him against like a Sam Stout or something like that. That'd be really cool. You know, Cerrone versus Tavares would be a cool, like, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu fight. But, you know, it's a good win for him. Spencer Fisher, it's like the same story. I'm getting more convinced that this guy doesn't care to get a championship anymore. I think that he's just gonna, like, fight for a paycheck. I mean, he has good fights. He has fun fights. He wants to slug it out with people. And the thing is, Fisher, it's better to put him up against, like, a guy who has good stand-up. Just because he'll fight, you know, he'll really go at it in the stand-up. You know, he has a weakness with getting taken down a lot of times. So another stand-up fighter would be pretty cool for Fisher to fight. Okay, let's go on to the main card as Stanislav Nedkov beat Luis Kane. I did not pick this one. This is one of those cases where it's like a guy who throws crazy, like, overhand rights with a lot of power beat the more technical guy. Funny story about Luis Kane too. Nedkov, Rogerio Nogueira, and I want to say Diabate all made their UFC debuts against Luis Kane, and he's lost by TKO by all of them. So it's, I think he is going to get, you know, like, it sucks. He's the only Brazilian to fight a non-Brazilian to lose. It's pretty sad, actually. I like Luis Kane. You know, he's really technical striker. He has a lot of power. He has good takedown defense, too, actually. But for some weird reason, I think what it is he's lacking defensively. He's a little too willing to eat some. He's just not defensively there. I've seen it in a lot of fights too. Even if it's like Steve Cantwell, and a lot of fights he loses, like, man, this guy just takes hits to the face a lot. And I mean, that's a problem with the guy that just keeps pushing forward. You know, it can happen. You know, it's. I don't think that he really, you know, there was a time when it looked like he'd be like a top 10 guy, but now I don't see it. You know, he looks like a guy I'll be stuck in the mid-tiers. With Nedkov, honestly, he looked a lot smaller than Kane. I kind of wanted to see him go to 185. His striking's not that great, but his ground skills, his grappling is actually his strength. He has a lot of power, too, so, I mean, he can stay in division. There's a lot of mid-tiers he can fight, like Krzysztof Szczynski, Prokrayak, Parash, Bonner, you know. There's a lot of guys for him to fight. So, be pretty interesting to see what he can do. He's undefeated, too. So, yeah. Next fight after that was pretty awesome as Antonio Rodrigo Nogueira beat Brendan the Hybrid Schaub by KO in the first round. You know, one thing that was really cool about this fight was that Nogueira kind of got to show his chin again, because for a while you're just kind of like, you know, he got knocked out by Mir, he got knocked out by Cain Velasquez. I saw Schaub actually uppercut him clean and actually hit him pretty clean, and Nogueira would just keep pushing forward. So it was really cool. Nogueira looks slower than Schaub, but I think the thing that really helped Nogueira was that he keeps pushing forward. And I think that may have thrown Schaub off. When I think of a lot of his other fights, whether it's Krokop, Gonzaga, or whatnot, usually they don't push forward on Schaub. So, you know, I guess, you know, and even like Nelson, you know, you know, I guess right now I'm kind of seeing that Schaub wants to be the hammer, not the nail, and he might be in trouble if he's the nail in the fight. And this fight kind of shows that, because Nogueira's a lot slower. He's not known for having KO power. You know, if you can get Brendan Schaub to start backing up, you might be able to get this kid in trouble. He's still a prospect though. Losing to Nogueira and Roy Nelson, you know, and you have less than 10 fights in your career isn't a bad thing. Getting KO'd twice so early in your career isn't a good thing, you know. Great win by Nogueira. You know, it's really tough to say if this guy is actually gonna get on a title run. I mean, I love the guy. I was cheering up and down when he won. I didn't think he'd win. I thought Schaub was gonna win. I thought if Nogueira was gonna win, it would be on the ground, and it's really cool that he won in the stand-up. You actually saw some head movement from Nogueira, so that was pretty cool too. But you know, he takes a lot of shots, and when you fight, I mean, I don't think he'll fight like Junior Dos Santos, but if you fight someone like Shane Carwin, Shane Carwin's kind of slow. He can fight Mir again. That would actually be pretty interesting. Oh, and that's another thing too about this fight. If Schaub won, he would be really close to title contention. And now the only guy that's even remotely close to title contention in heavyweight is Frank Mir. Brendan Schaub's out of title contention now. And maybe Nogueira's back in, I guess. So, but I wouldn't want to see like Nogueira versus Cain Velasquez again or something like that. You know, it doesn't really. You know, I think Cain Velasquez would just beat Nogueira again, to be perfectly honest. Good win for him. I think he can fight someone like the winner of Congo versus Mitrione. And Brendan Schaub can fight the loser of that bout. I don't know if you want to feed Nogueira more up-and-comers or if you actually want to give him a legit title run. If you want to give him the title run, you want to go with Nogueira versus Mir for a #1 contender bout, I think, at least. Next right after that, we saw a really good striking battle as Edson Barboza beat Ross Pearson by split decision. I'm really glad, my friends were saying it too, I'm really glad it was 29-28 split. It wasn't like some weird like 30-27 or something, you know. Either of these guys could have won. I do think that Ross Pearson was winning, but especially on the aggression. Edson Barboza, I thought, was getting the cleaner strikes in. And I guess, especially around the third round, Edson got this really good left hook that may have sealed it in one of those judges' eyes. He's still undefeated. And what's cool about this fight, too, is like Barboza was like Muay Thai, Pearson is mainly boxing. So you kind of got to see like Muay Thai versus boxing at a high level, you know, in MMA. So it was really nice to see. It's technical, the pace was really good. You know, no fighter really had a particular advantage over the other. Ross Pearson was checking a lot of Barboza's kicks. He ate a couple too, especially to the body. You know, Barboza's going for a couple spinning back kicks as well. So those, you know, the flashy moves are pretty cool. He's really fast. I mean, he throws a kick like it's a whip. I mean, it is really quick. The thing with Barboza, I mean, he was backing up a lot, which, you know, wasn't the best thing to do against Pearson. I think that's really what helped Pearson get ahead. It's one of these. This fight is also not a bad loss for Pearson. It made him look good. You know, it's one of those fights where it's like he lost, but he didn't look worse. You know, like he can fight. You know, he doesn't really need to move that far down the ladder or anything. So there's a lot of good fights for him. I think Pearson's actually someone to watch out for. Looks like a guy that actually might be able to break into the top 10 in in a couple years. Barboza, I mean, this guy's a prospect to look out for. I like this guy. He's really young. He has some good takedown defense. His striking is really good. You know, he's definitely got a lot of tools. at a really young age and really early into his MMA career. So he's someone to look out for. There's a lot of, because lightweight's such a deep division. I mean, the guy can fight like Donald Cerrone next, or he can fight like who's ever coming off of a win. He can fight like Rafael dos Anjos. If you know, geez, you can fight Sam Stout. The winner of Wyman versus Danzig. There's just a lot of guys for this guy to fight too. There's no shortage of guys there. And in the co-main event, Mauricio Shogun beat Forrest Griffin by KO in the first round. Man, Forrest looked really bad. It's just one of those things where it's like I don't know what to make of him anymore. You know, when you think of like people to eventually fight Bones, John Jones, Forrest was a guy that's like, okay, there's Machida, there's Phil Davis, there's Rampage, of course, Rashad Evans, and maybe Forrest Griffin's like the 5th guy I want to talk about. Now it's like, man, I don't want to see Forrest Griffin fighting Jones. You know, I don't even know if I want to see him fighting like top guys. He just looks sluggish. I was like, it's kind of funny because Shogun in the first fight looked really sluggish, and now in their second fight, Forrest is the one that looks really sluggish. So it's really interesting. Good win from Shogun. He really pushed forward here. You know, he was fighting more on the inside, which I'm really glad because, you know, he's not going to win on the outside. You know, he didn't throw like a lot of kicks. He threw a lot of looping punches that he does. His ground and pound is pretty vicious. He throws some really good hammer fists. You saw that against like Chuck Liddell and against Forrest Griffin. Griffin bobbleheads a lot when he loses. Like against Jardine, Rashad Evans. I mean, his head just bobbleheads against the ground. It's, you know, you kind of want to wonder about his motivation too. I mean, the guy just had a kid. He's said that, you know, he doesn't have that same fire he had for fighting that he had before. So I gotta question his motivation. I don't really know what to do with Forrest Griffin, you know. I mean, I suppose you can give him someone like a Thiago Silva versus Forrest Griffin if you still want to give him someone up there. I mean, Forrest Griffin still has a name, so you can't give him like a Nedkov or something like that. You have to give him someone kind of high up there, but, you know, and he's fought a lot of heavyweights already, or light heavyweights already. You can't really give him Machida because Machida's coming off a win. So I would go with like Forrest Griffin versus Thiago Silva. With Shogun, great performance from him. I don't know if he'd ever beat Jones, so it's just one of those things where it's like, I can't really say who he should fight next. If he should fight Machida again. If Dan Henderson comes into the UFC, that'd be pretty cool. Shogun versus Dan Henderson. Maybe Phil Davis. There's good fights for him, but it's really tough to say because it's like he lost so convincingly to the champion. I'd like to see him fight Rampage in a rematch. That'd be pretty interesting. But for the most part, it's really hard to say exactly where you want to put this guy. He needs to fight top 10 guys, but you don't, you know, he's fought a lot of them already, and I don't know, he has to really prove himself. It's kind of like Vitor in middleweight. He's got to kind of prove himself to show that he can, like, fight the champ again. Okay. And in the main event of the night, we have the middleweight champion Anderson Silva beating Yushin Okami by TKO in the second round. You know, I was kind of nervous for Anderson at first because it's kind of like, okay, Okami could get the takedown. I kind of said this in my predictions. Okami is not that great of a takedown guy. I mean, he's not that good of a wrestler. He's a good wrestler. He's not a great wrestler. You know, it's just one of those things where, you know, if Anderson knows he can like stuff your takedowns or like isn't afraid, you know, he's just gonna go off. I mean, what this guy does is like unbelievable. I mean, he puts his hands down, you know, just moves his, you know, does some head movement, counters with a jab, drops a guy. You know, I mean, it's like instantaneous, too. It's like, how did he... I mean, he's just so far above any middleweight right now. Like, okay, you know, he can fight Chael Sonnen again, I guess, but otherwise, the only challenges for him really are in, like, light heavyweight. And, you know, what's kind of sad, the guy's 36, he doesn't take a lot of damage. One thing that I was reading, and I have to agree with this, is, like, I want to see him fight more, but I hope he knows when to hang him up too, because I don't want to see someone beating him because he got old, you know, and not because the other guy was a superior fighter. If he ever should lose, he has the most consecutive wins in the UFC. He has the most title defenses in the UFC. His list of top 10 fighters that he's finished is amazing. And a lot of people want to say, like, oh, middleweight's not a deep division. No, it's a really deep it's not, like, as deep as, like, it's not a stacked division, but it's a solid division. You know, you have a solid amount of top fighters, mid-tier fighters, and lower-tier fighters. You know, a lot of these top guys have been fighting for a long time. And a lot of these top guys have been fighting each other as well. You know, so it's not like he's fighting... like, you know, he's fighting, like, legit top fighters, you know, and he is just clowning them. I mean, he's just so far above the rest. You kind of want to see him move up to light heavyweight, even though, like, I don't even want to see Anderson Silva versus GSP, because it's kind of like, you know, I think Silva would definitely clown GSP on the feet. I think GSP might go for relentless takedowns. But the size thing, I just, you know, you just gotta wonder, you know, if GSP can really do that much. Can he really grind 5 rounds with Anderson Silva? I mean, I don't know if that's possible. With Okami, you know, Okami, there's a lot of good fights for him. I like to see him fight Vitor Belfort. I like to see him fight Michael Bisping. I like to see him fight Chris Lieben. You know, there's a lot of good fights for him. So, I mean, he's definitely not done with the top of the division or anything. It's kind of sad because he worked so hard to get this title shot, and then he got it and he got clowned, and it's kind of like, I mean, it took so long for him to get this that it's kind of like it's back to the bottom. He might even go back to the prelims. You know, because a lot of his fights really were on the prelims. It wasn't until recently that he started becoming a main card fighter, you know. With Anderson, I mean, he's going to get the winner of Chael versus Stan, unless, like, this GSP super fight happens or something. I'd like to see some light heavyweights like Rashad Evans or Shogun move down to fight Anderson, but otherwise, I mean, Anderson's just way ahead of the pack. Okay, yeah, and that's pretty much it for my UFC 134 post-fight analysis. If you have any comments, just leave them below. And that's it for MMA for you. Thank you very much.